So recently, as I've been diving back into the history of League of Legends, I noticed that there has been a consistent case of teams refusing to scrim other teams throughout the history of the LCS. And this has been quite persistent. In fact, you can even find examples, all the way up to 2020 or I think even 2021, to where players have said that their team can't get scrims with a certain team, etc. And I find that most of this is actually through the ego of the players or the coaching staff themselves. And I think this is kind of holding back the entire LCS. So if we jump back over when Echo Fox was in the league, this was in 2017 when I think this was the biggest thing when players were saying that they couldn't get scrims because Echo Fox had said, and Froggen specifically had said in an interview, that Echo Fox couldn't get scrims against other teams. Just it seemed like there was a mass boycott of Echo Fox during the time. And I believe this to be true because it seemed like other teams actually fucking hated Rick Fox. They hated Rick Fox. They hated the coaching staff. They hated the entire organization. So it seemed like all of them actually boycotted against that organization in order to basically shut them out from having adequate practice. Now, that maybe alludes to the entire thing of Echo Fox going out, right? With the whole racist story and whatnot, which kind of pushed it over the edge. But yeah, now you could see the entire full story of it, along with there was an instance in Counter-Strike as well to where I believe it was Echo Fox was left out of, I want to say the team union or something, or it was maybe the players union or some shit. It was reported by Richard Lewis at some point. It was to dealing with the PEA or something like that. But the point is that Echo Fox was completely fucked in the entire esports industry, not just League of Legends, but in Counter-Strike as well, which they were pretty heavily invested into. So then begs the question of, is it unethical to deny scrims from a team? I don't really think so, but with the caveat that you're doing it for the correct reasons. Now, if you're doing it to fuck over an organization, just to fuck over an organization because maybe you hate the owner or you hate the coaching staff, etc., it's a pretty petty reason. If you want to be like that and basically essentially tank your chances of improving your own team because out of spite, fine. But then there's also the other side of, well, is that team shitty and in terms of performance wise, and do you even get adequate practice out of playing against a team like that? I would say that you have, I guess the right to refuse to scrim a certain team because they just have a low level of play. Maybe you've scrimmed them once and they were just terrible. You see that they're terrible in the LCS as the weeks go on by. Maybe they're the 10th place team or the 9th place team. And so you're just it's not even worth my time. That's like scrimming an academy team. I don't get anything out of it. So yes, I could see that being a reason as to why, it isn't unethical to not scrim a team or to refuse to scrim a team if they suck. I'm not saying that is necessarily what happened with Echo Fox because clearly there was more going on in the background. But this is why you can see the whole entire scrim culture is very complicated within the LCS because it is both politics and it is both strength. And, as we know, there is the four horsemen of the LCS, right? The four kings of the LCS that basically run the entire thing and decide how everything is structured, right? You have TSM, Cloud9, and then you have Team Liquid, and then after that gets kind of a little fuzzy. It used to be CLG, but now maybe it's probably 100 Thieves. So all of them get the cream of the crop. And he was even talked about before. I don't really remember what year, but it was the fact that those teams ended up deciding on who basically got to scrim who, and they would be able to set their schedule how they wanted to, and they could even cancel scrims at the last second if they got a better opponent, which is oftentimes what they would do. So, like, you could see how scrimming in LCS becomes very complicated for the middle or the lower teams in the LCS. In 2016, Doublelift said that Immortals wouldn't scrim them, and this was in the summer playoffs where both teams were on the opposite side of the bracket. I think this was the year that that Huni pulled out the Lucian top, I think. But they were on both opposite ends of the bracket, and they were seeded for semifinals. And Immortals refused to scrim TSM. Now, Doublelift saying this and being bitter about it is actually kind of dumb, because when you look at it, it's just like, well, TSM are probably going to get to the finals. Immortals are probably going to get to the finals as well. Immortals were a better team, at least thought of. And so, like, why would you scrim TSM? That's stupid. You just reveal everything. So, like, that kind of a complication, especially when it comes to playoffs, is actually more intricate than one might think, right? Because you have to think, okay, what are the likely chances that this team progresses throughout the bracket, and then I just revealed all of my secrets to them? Like, that's a bad idea. So but then again, you can't play too bad of a team to where it's inadequate practice, so the practice actually doesn't mean anything because they were just a weak playoff team, and really they shouldn't be in playoffs, you know? And this goes more further into, as the bracket style developed further and further, as the LCS has gone to a wider bracket. Now there's 8 teams in playoffs, which is insane. So the bottom 2 teams just don't make it. But it's like, okay, well, I don't want to practice against the 7th or even 6th place team. But also, too, I don't want to practice against the 2nd or 3rd seed, because I probably might play against them if I am, one of the top 3 seeds. So it becomes this like intricate dance that is far more complicated than one might think initially. So going way back, Samsung Blue versus Samsung White over in 2014. Now, this was at a time to where LCK had sister teams over in that region to where they could compete in the LCK, and it wasn't a conflict of interest somehow. Even though Riot probably knew that it was, they were just like, well, we got to get as many teams and as many players as possible, and we don't have anyone else that is getting into the league. So, but whatever, we'll let it slide. So this happened to where Samsung White and Samsung Blue faced off in world semifinals. Now, it's very famous that both of these sister teams, well, basically all of the LCK sister teams, scrimmed against each other quite heavily. So, and Samsung Blue was actually supposed to be the better team of the two, but it became an upset to where Samsung White ended up beating Blue. And White was the strongest remaining team after that, and then they won the world championship. So you could see that there's a detriment even too of scrimming a partner for too long or too much, because then they end up knowing about your weaknesses and your strengths, and then it becomes this weird dice roll to where you aren't necessarily sure how to beat the enemy team, and you more so have to outwit them in terms of how you draft and how you play, rather than just your inherent skill at the game itself, which is exactly what happened with Samsung White and Samsung Blue. So you take that and then you translate that over into the LCS or to scrimming against other teams, not even just your academy team, but other teams within the LCS. And you could see where the problems actually arise, especially when it comes to playoffs. Another thing, speaking of academy teams, is the fact that LCS players had reportedly been refusing to scrim against academy players per a LS tweet in the end of 2020, which was after summer. So you consider that, and you think of just the absurdity of, not only is it hard to get practice against teams that are better than you, right? And say if you're in the middle of the pack or maybe at the bottom, it's hard to get scrims against teams that are better than you. But now your players don't want to even scrim your academy team, which your academy team is, it's basically there for you to try experimental stuff, right? Like some really wacky shit that you don't want anyone else to know. You know, maybe you do take a Lucian top or something like that back in the day. So that's what that team is for. And at least initially, although if people end up beefing up their academy teams, then it becomes actual legitimate practice. And so now you begin to wonder all of the politics that get into scrimming against your own academy team. Are people throwing scrims on purpose, you know, or kind of ending it early? Is there like a fight for pick priority, right? Because it's like, well, if I'm top lane and I'm playing against this academy player, yeah, I probably do want pick priority and I want the better champion or I want the counter pick, etc. So like give me like last pick so that I could, you know, pick against him and beat his ass in top lane and show my dominance of why I'm the better top laner, and that's why I'm in the LCS, bitch. So like you get all these inter-team or organization politics that end up basically ruining scrims because players have too big of an ego. And you contrast that with something like back in the day, a Freak of Freaks. This was I think it was in 2018, I want to say, to where they were playing 4 scrim blocks a day under I Love Oov's coaching. And I'll link that story down below, actually. It's one of my favorite pieces that was written by Fion. But it goes into detail of just the grind lord fucking aspect of what is the LCK, and particularly a Freak of Freaks, and particularly I Love Oov. But to give you guys a thought of it, 4 scrim blocks a day, and typically a scrim block is 3 scrims, right, per, you know, one team, right? So say you're facing against TSM and your team Liquid, that's a best of 3. And you play out the entire best of 3, and then you scrim another team. So you're playing 12 games a day. Most people don't even get solo queue like that high. Most people don't even get 12 games of solo queue a day. And so typically what can happen is the highest that you can get is 3 scrim blocks a day. So they were going one more above and beyond every day, which is absolutely nuts. So this is like the different culture that you see between these two different regions. And this might also explain why someone like a Team Liquid fell off over in 2021 to get beaten by 100 Thieves facing off in the finals, because, well, you think of just the summer split playoff practice and how you have to juggle exactly what teams that you can face, what teams that you can't, what teams that are willing to face you, etc. Like, then it becomes much more complicated from the outset. And additionally, you have what happened previously and I think even currently as well, which is canceling scrims. Like, teams cancel scrims all the time for stupid shit, like because they found a better scrim partner. And I remember in 2019, TSM canceled scrims against Clutch Gaming because they were getting shit on. And then in, I think it was Worlds 2020, LCS teams were canceling scrims against other teams because they were getting fucking destroyed so hard. Like, how does that equate, you know? Like, how do they not just bear through it and try and get some kind of practice out of it? I mean, Alfari, I think Sword Art, Sven, everyone has been saying that all these teams dodge scrims basically all the time. Like, every LCS team seems to be dodging a lot of scrims and not holding their word to that they would do an entire scrim block. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And you could see that it's entirely mostly on the basis of ego and the fact that they just can't handle a particular loss or whatnot, and their mental is so fucking weak. So I don't know how LCS teams don't know how to get practice out of their scrims. It seems like both the coaching staff, I would mostly blame this on the coaching staff and the fact that they don't know how to extract the most from scrims, which then means that it trickles down to the players, and it becomes that they have a weak mentality about the scrims as well too, or maybe they don't understand how to get the most out of the scrims themselves because they aren't being taught by the coaching staff. So I just think this entire scrim culture is very shitty. I joke in saying that it's toxic, given I was talking about Riot Light before. But I do think that it is a detriment to the entire environment of what is the LCS. And that is, I think, one of the biggest reasons as to why the region is being held back is because of, it's not just the lack of solo queue. It's not that. Like, that is a part in it, but if then you decide to do structured practice but you fuck your own structured practice up, you have nothing to complain about.